Today is a special treat as I'm joined by Michael Roviello, a former US Navy helicopter rescue swimmer whose life's journey has taken him from navigating turbulent waters to finding his own flow and essence in the realm of self-healing and transformation. I've invited Michael onto the show to explore the resilient mindset that he's cultivated, allowing him to not only survive, but ultimately thrive by coming back home to himself. Now he empowers others to discover their own transformative potential through his biohacking, wellness, and human optimization center in Arizona called Optimyze. Let's dive in and unpack the wisdom he's gained along his journey. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate being here.
Oh, happy to have you on. So, Michael, your story is super interesting to me. I'd love it if you can take us through a little bit of what got you going from being in the US military to now owning Optimyze.
Okay, there's a story there. But yeah, ultimately, I grew up in New York City. So I was like born and raised there and then chose to go into the US Navy. And I joined the US Navy in 1999. And there got to a time where I was getting ready to separate. So I was really trying to figure out where I wanted to be, where I wanted to go, whether or not I wanted to stay in the military. I was going to get orders potentially either back to Florida. There was a possibility I can get orders overseas. So I was kind of exploring all these different options. And ultimately, I decided that I was going to separate and I was going to go live a quote unquote normal life. In the US Navy, we deployed quite a bit, especially during the time frame that I was in, because the United States and Canada was involved in multiple wars. So the deployment cycle was very long and the tempo was very quick, meaning you would get home. There wasn't much time left to be spent at home. And then ultimately we would be back out to sea. I would deploy with aircraft carriers, which were basically giant floating airports. And the helicopters that I flew in, we would usually fly them on the ship, and then the ship would go out for anywhere from 6 to 8 months. And then we would operate doing a variety of different tasks, and then eventually come back to San Diego, where I was stationed. And when I made the decision to separate, I had this kind of burning desire just to get into business and learn about money and really try to achieve like financial success. I was reading a lot of books when I was in the service, especially you have a lot of downtime on a ship about finances and real estate and investment and all of these areas that were relatively new to me because I grew up a very kind of blue collar type of, work environment. And so I left and I had an opportunity to move to Phoenix, Arizona. It was actually a city called Scottsdale, Arizona. And so I came here and I loved it. There was a lot of sunlight. It's a desert. I never lived in the desert. I thought it was beautiful. The mountains, there was hiking, a lot of activities. People were out and about quite a bit. Almost every home has a pool here. So it was just like a very beautiful environment. So I decided to move here and I actually started working for a university. That was my first job. I didn't take much time off from the military, which I would say was probably one of my biggest mistakes that I made in my life, was not taking time off to really adjust. I literally went right back into work mode. And I think I gave myself maybe 3 weeks off, if that. And so before you know it, I was starting a new career in a new place around new people, new, work environment, which was drastically different from what I was doing in the Navy. I mean, I was flying 5 days a week. And then I went from flying to sitting in an office, talking on the phone and being behind a computer. So at first it was fine. And then ultimately what I started to notice was different things started to come up. I started to have like physical pain. And so I would just, I had insurance, I had the government care because of my military affiliation. So I had a lot of access to medical care. So I just started going to different doctors and specialists and starting to get different recommendations. And so what I was really learning is that I had some serious like neck pain and upper back pain that I didn't quite understand where it was coming from or what it was, but it would
Mm-hmm.
come in waves. So at times it was very manageable. And then at times it was like really debilitating where I couldn't really function, but I would still push through. I would still show up to work. I was going to school at night. So I was like still managing my life and all my activities and my social life. But I was experiencing these highs and lows of like physical pain. And I was also like dealing with other things that were bothering me at that time, which was like I had really poor sleep. I had a hard time getting to bed. I had a hard time staying asleep. I was waking up really tired. I was really lethargic throughout the day. So I was just dealing with a variety of like mental health, physical health, emotional health type of issues that I was just kind of burying, and just like still pushing through, still doing very well at my job,
Yeah.
still also going to school and learning and all of that. So I was very productive, but inside I was starting to have like a variety of complications until eventually it got so bad that a few years after I separated, I was recommended to have a cervical spine surgery where
Mm-hmm.
they go in through your throat, they move your esophagus, they fuse your spine, they remove some discs, and basically they put like a titanium plate in your neck to kind of hold your spine in order. And so I went through that procedure, and that procedure was helpful. And so I got some immediate results, after I started to come down after surgery and rest a bit. I also did not give myself much rest. Like before, I was like showing up to school like with a neck brace. Like I had this really bad habit of just like not giving myself time to wind down, relax, and rest. You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
so that's like a common theme that has really been going on in my life for a very long time. So what I noticed is about 9 months after my surgery, I started to experience like similar issues. And so that ultimately is what got me into natural wellness, holistic wellness. I went through a variety of different procedures, injections, pain management, obviously the surgery, lots of different types of services that are all kind of common practice for like Western medicine. And what I noticed about like a year later is that I was having complications. So ultimately, the surgeon wanted to do another surgery. And that's kind of where I drew a line in the sand. It was like, I have to find another way. So I
Yeah.
started to explore the world of holistic medicine, natural medicine. And that's how I got into the work that I'm doing now. It took a while because I was really just researching and going down different rabbit holes and exploring like what worked, what was helpful, what was not helpful. And
Mm-hmm.
all roads were really pointing towards the mind.
Yeah.
And that was the challenging part for me because I was really just trying to find a quick fix, some sort of remedy, therapeutic, some type of service that would just take the pain away and just get me back to functioning normal like I was when I was in the service. So yeah, it all pointed towards the mind. And the reason how I got into this work really was through a book called The Mind Body Prescription by Dr. John Sarno. And he was a medical doctor who basically talked a lot about tension myoneural syndrome, which is basically tension in the mind creates physical pain in the body. And so
Mm.
I was really understanding this idea between the mind body connection and psychosomatic pain, and realizing that unresolved, mental, emotional, these types of things will manifest itself in the body as physical pain. So it
Mhm.
has to be addressed. So then how do you address it? Where do you go? Do you just go and talk to somebody? Is this like, should this be like a counseling type of service? And what I found that it was way deeper than that. So that's
Mm.
ultimately how I got into the world of, say, biohacking or human optimization, is really just exploring all the things that have worked for me for over the years.
Yeah, wow. That is quite a story. So
So
do you feel like or do you think that that pain was there, but you didn't recognize it while you were in your military service because you weren't as in tune with your body?
it did haunt me in my military service for sure. I was dealing with it,
Oh,
yeah, at different levels.
okay.
It came in waves. There was times where, well, very early on in my military career, I had that serious problem, and so there was times where I couldn't participate in certain activities, and so I was really just got used to taking medication. If I was feeling down and in pain and couldn't perform, I would just take a lot of painkillers or anti-inflammatory pills or muscle relaxers. And so I just got used to like basically over prescribing and
Mm-hmm.
not getting to the root cause.
Yeah, yeah. And I find a lot of times it's easier to just mask the symptoms than to really dig deeper and look at the underlying cause of what's creating the symptoms in the first place.
Yeah, especially when it comes into mental health, because
Yeah.
it's not like a replacement where you just like have a bad knee and you go to the doctor and then they replace your knee and then you're back, after you rehab, then you're back to normal. Mental health and emotional health and sleep issues, they require a lot of lifestyle changes.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think that it's, it's hard for us to admit when we have certain mental health issues that we need to address. Like just personally speaking from my experience, I mean, there was a point where I didn't even understand what a doctor was meaning by you have anxiety. Like it's almost like a hard pill to swallow when you realize that like there is no medical prescription for mental health in the sense that you really need to just stop, right? Like you mentioned that it was hard for you to give yourself that time to transition or giving yourself that downtime, giving ourselves, permission to not always be so productive and sometimes
Yes.
just stop and do some self-care, right? Some inner reflection and self-care on how do we keep ourselves healthy, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. How do we keep our emotions healthy? And I found that that type of work is the real work. That's the hard work, is to really go back and look inward and see, what are the things inside of me that I've not been paying attention to, right?
Oh
And
yeah. Then and it goes down a lot of different rabbit holes because you get into like tension in the mind, tension in the body, how emotions are stuck in the body. Wim Hof always talks about that we have issues in our tissues. So it's really
mm,
complex. And I think science is really starting to scratch the surface to uncover the connection between the mind and the body. And there's just a lot we still don't know. But there are a
mhm.
lot of like really good remedies that exist out there. And not only are they remedies to mask the pain, but they help get to the root causes. And so I've been exploring that for a while. And that's
Mhm.
ultimately what I do today is share a lot of these techniques and procedures and lifestyle changes. And that's the
Okay.
hard part is the lifestyle changes, not just the pill or the procedure, or even in the biohacking world, they're very fixated sometimes on technology. Oh, use this technology and it will,
Yeah.
I look at it as the same mentality as the pill, there is no, there's no magic or silver bullet, that's just going to take care of all of your issues. So really
Yeah.
it's just constant unwinding. It's learning how to let go. It's exploring yourself. It's changing, old habits. It's creating new habits and rituals. I would say that's really where the power is, but most people don't want to sign up for that, is what I've,
Right.
because it takes time. But what I tell people is that the journey is beautiful and it's amazing and it's fun and you get to explore and you get to learn, and I think that's what keeps us on our toes as we get older, to keep growing and learning. So I really enjoy actually the journey part of exploration. So I'm always exploring something new. And I'm typically attracted to health, wellness, but not only just health, wellness, and spirituality, but the connection that we had with our more primitive, or, our ancestors, and what they knew about health, what they knew about spirituality, what they knew about nature, and the connection between all of that, and how they were able to achieve optimal health in some of the harshest conditions. So most of the work that I explore now is all about how can we get back to our more primal self in many aspects of our life.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, we need to kind of learn how to get back to basics, you know? Yeah, very true. And it's funny because you're right, like with the biohacking space, use this technology or do this DNA test or change these things about your lifestyle. I think it ultimately boils down to mindset in the sense that, all these things that are going to help us optimize and improve our lives is going to require us to change the way we think, to change the actions, the habits that we have to change. What have you found in like running your business Optimyze? What have you found that people have done that has actually helped them change and remain consistent to committing to their health and their wellness?
Community and connection, going to a place where people feel welcome, accepted, not judged, and they're around like-minded people who are interested in growth and where they can be their authentic self. That's really powerful. When you are in an environment where you feel good to be your authentic self, there's a lot of change that can happen very rapidly there. In a lot of the environments that we tend to experience in our life, whether it's a work environment, a lot of times people feel like they can't be their authentic self in the work environment. They have to worry about, the judgment of, their fellow coworkers or, leadership, and how they will be perceived. In a lot of social groups, there's a lot of that. So I wanted to really be in an environment where I can just feel good and be my authentic self and surround myself with people who are interested in similar things, right? Which was, talking about subjects that might be slightly taboo or out there, or, learning about biohacking or learning about, health. I just got bored of the same old guy stuff, to be quite honest with you. I was a very normal, stereotypical like guy in the sense that I was, pro-military. I went to the gym, I worked out. I was like a man's man. I still am a man's man, but I just got bored with the football and the fantasy football talk and the over drinking and just that culture. I feel like that's a collective consciousness in itself. I just got really bored with it. And so I just stopped responding, and I stopped going to a lot of the activities that I was being invited to, whether it be, if I knew the activity was going to essentially be revolved around excess alcohol, staying out late, eating food that was obviously not ideal, and waking up the next morning late, groggy, tired. If I knew that that invitation was going to lead to that, I just learned how to say no. And learning how to say no was probably the best medicine that I found, because it was just being okay with being by myself, being okay with not accepting invitation of others, even though they wanted me to be there. Not obviously participating in the activities that weren't going to contribute to me getting better, even though I might have like these moments of like feeling good, in an evening. I knew the next few days I was going to feel crappy. So that was actually really powerful medicine, was just saying no, not participating in activities, and living a very kind of boring life where you stay in on a Friday and Saturday night. You don't go to the Sunday fun day activities where people are going to be day drinking. And what I noticed was the idea of these things always sounded a lot more fun than the actual event. So I was often disappointed, especially as I started to make a lot of lifestyle changes. And these things were also getting in the way of my progress, which was, I was studying, I was learning about my mental health. I was developing a meditation practice. I was developing a spiritual practice. I was doing breath work on a daily basis. And when you're hanging out with people that are interested in drinking all the time, staying out late, eating, and they're just not interested in those things, is what I've learned in most cases.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there was really, the connection was being lost. And so I was essentially creating new habits and rituals, lifestyle changes that were all contributing in a positive way to my life.
Yeah. It also sounds like you were forming a new identity by creating those new habits and rituals and creating new boundaries for people that are not in alignment with that new identity that you're creating.
Yes. And, I think Muhammad Ali said it best. There's a famous quote, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's something along the lines of that you basically shouldn't be the same person. Like sometimes people take pride in this idea that, oh, I'm the same guy that I've always been. I'm the same, I'm the same guy that I was when I was in high school. Well, I don't want to be the same guy that I was when I was in high school. I want to always be learning, developing, and changing. And it doesn't mean I don't have my, my core integrity and my personality and different traits that obviously someone from my past or even somebody from my present will say, oh yeah, that's Michael. But I always want to be growing. And in order to grow, you have to step into discomfort. You have to challenge yourself and learn new things. You have to get out of the mundane, circle of life that's, where there's not a lot of growth. And you also have to change your perception. And in order to change your perception on your environment, you have to shed a lot of old rituals, behaviors, or what I like to refer to them as programs, because we have all these programs that we inherited or developed from our parents, from our early childhood. And they're running in the background. And most times we're not even conscious of these programs and how we behave in relationships or behave in friendships or behave at work, or what our underlying motivation is for how we're doing things. And what I've learned is, as I continued to do any sort of inner work, whether it was like meditation, breath work, any sort of self-reflection, any tools that would help me with self-reflection, all of the different plant medicines that I've done, whether they're, in Brazil or Peru, and going into these kind of deep understanding of my own consciousness, I started to really just continue to shed old programs, old layers, and start to become a new person. And there were sometimes people in my life that did not like this new person because it wasn't the same person that I was, that was essentially maybe feeding them in some way. So there's a lot of relationships that came and gone as well when you go through any sort of dramatic change or transformation in your life. You bring in new people, you shed old people, and no big deal for the people that leave. You love them for the experiences that you had and for what you learned through your experiences with them, both good and bad. But ultimately, you invite new people in that's more in resonance with what your frequency is and what your vibration is at this moment in your life. So I believe we're always attracting people all the time into our lives based on our frequency. So I spend a lot of time in just conscious thought, essentially, and like, what is my frequency? And what am I putting off out there? What are my behaviors? What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? And how is that affecting not only myself, but the people around me? And so I think little things that we do every single day, little decisions every day, thoughts, actions,
Mhm.
are constantly impacting that vibratory field that essentially people are feeling who are interacting with us on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that. And I completely agree. It is in the day-to-day of what we're doing that's compounding into, you know, what we're becoming. And I find that like now, I mean, I've kind of gone through a similar transformative journey. And yeah, I've shed a lot of people who are no longer in resonance of who I'm becoming. And what I've realized is that we need to be very intentional with the relationships and the people that we keep around us. And if you're thinking about your relationship with someone, a friend, it's now I ask myself, like, what is the intention of the relationship? What am I here to give that relationship? What are we looking to co-create as part of that relationship? And if it's a hi, how's it going? We get together once a month, just sort of doing something to not just kill time, but like just for entertainment purposes. I find that like those relationships, I find I have things that are in my life that I'd rather give time to than to be in those relationships where there really isn't too much substance or depth or growth with that other person.
Yes.
And you know, and I find that like a lot of people feel that maybe they need to hold on tighter to their identity or who they think they are, whereas I've found it super, super empowering and freeing to say, hey, I don't need to be that woman. I don't need to be that person. I can be someone new. I can reinvent myself. Every time I learn and I read and I grow and I get in circles with other people who are teaching me, you know what? I like that I'm not that same person that I was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That feels good. How do you find like the people that you work with in your line of work with Optimyze? What do people normally like? What are people thinking when they come to your center? Like, are they open and ready to embrace a new way of living and having wellness and health in their life? Or is this something that you kind of cultivate through your programs, through the services that you offer? What is the mindset of these people coming into your services?
Well, we get a variety of different people that will come in. I would say majority of people come in with this underlying fear because we
Okay.
have and practice cold water therapy. So there's an
Mm-hmm.
element where people know that's part of the process, but
Mm.
they've taken the step to sign up, complete the forms online, grab their bathing suit, grab their towel, and walk into the center. So that right there is a big step that a lot of
Yeah.
people won't take. So I always appreciate them for doing that.
Yeah.
And and there's like a surrender part of all of this, right? You have to surrender and just allow that you might not have it all figured out, but you're going to try something new. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
do something new, and you're going to do something challenging. So I really, so I always really appreciate people that come in to the center to try something new. I really know that they're on their road to growth. And this is just one element of it in many, many ways. Most of the people that come to us are very new to these types of therapies and practices, but we also get a lot of people who are, they're experienced. They've been, doing this type of work. Maybe they had a history of athletics where they were
Mm.
doing these types of services. But what I'm also realizing is that a lot of these technologies are quote unquote new to our
Mm-hmm.
society, but they're really old. They're actually all very, very, very old. And so there's this resurgence of this old wisdom that is coming back to our present moment. There's a resurgence of this ancient wisdom of these really ancestral techniques. Because when
Mm-hmm.
I started to study hot and cold therapy and trying to find, what cultures were doing heat therapy, I found that pretty much indigenous people all throughout the planet on different continents who had no communication with each other were doing a variety of hot and cold therapies, where they were doing something called temescal, which was like almost like a ceremonial practice revolved around heat, or sweat lodges, which is a Native American practice, or the native people of Northern Europe were using wood-fired, basically what we would call present-day saunas. They were using different variations of that. And they were also using variations of going into cold water through cold water rivers, and then going into hot and cold, which, we call contrast therapy. So pretty much all over the planet, different native groups, different indigenous groups, doesn't matter if your ancestors are European or if they're North American, South American, African, Asian. They were all doing different forms of connecting with nature, not only for health, mental health, physical health, but also for spiritual practice too. So I think a lot of this movement today and what Wim Hof has really done with bringing breath work and cold therapy to the masses, he's really just reintroducing these techniques to humanity. So, and I'm happy and really grateful and proud to be part of that movement in a very big way here in Phoenix.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, more of centers like Optimyze are required everywhere, including Ottawa. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that I think it's nice to bring back the old wisdom, ancient wisdom, because I think that in modern society, that's something that we've really forgotten in terms of our ancestors and how they used to live and how they used to maintain their health. We're now inundated with so much technology and stress in our lives and overwhelm and work and devices and social media that it's so easy to really disconnect with ourselves and our needs and what makes us thrive internally. So having centers like Optimize really helps people get back into their roots. And I'm curious because you'd mentioned that it's there's a lot of fear involved and coming. I'm trying to imagine myself coming to your center, and I've never done those things. Like hot therapy, cold plunges. Those are things that it requires us to get into a physically uncomfortable state. So I'm curious, is there any mindset work that takes place at these centers to really get people in a mental state where they're actually able to endure such levels of discomfort?
Yeah, I would say the first level of discomfort that people have to face is putting on a bathing suit in front of strangers.
Yes, that's so true.
First,
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's an obstacle, right? And we are as society, we really judge ourselves and compare ourselves to others. So there's that element of that. And women are very hard on themselves, is what I've learned. Men are too. I think they hide it better, but women are more openly kind of hard on themselves. And so that's the first element of discomfort, is being in a bathing suit in a group of people and being okay with that. And so that's the first element. So there's a lot of learning in just that element alone. But when you come into the door, you're greeted and you're welcomed. And that's really an important aspect, like you said, of the mindset, of knowing that this place is comfortable and that this is a place where I can be vulnerable, right? Because there's a vulnerable element to this, not only from the bathing suit aspect, all right? We have a variety of different ages that come to our place. We have people in their 20s, but we have people in their 70s that come. Yes, wow. People that come in their 70s, and they come every single day, and they're doing cold plunges and sauna and jacuzzi and all of it. And they come to breathwork classes. And so they are actively involved in the community. And they will be in a sauna hanging out with a 30-year-old person that's young enough to be their grandchild. And they are having great conversation and just connecting as two human beings. And that's beautiful element of what we do. But some of the mindset techniques is really what we teach people, is how to react and adapt to stress in a healthy way. One thing that our ancestors were able to do very well is they were able to adapt and to environmental stressors. I mean, just think about Ottawa. Ottawa is cold in the winter, and it's probably lovely during the summer, but in the fall and also the spring, it probably is cold in the evening and cold in the morning.
Mhm.
So there was native people that lived in that area. I think you call them first, what do you call it? First peoples?
First Nations.
First Nations?
Yeah, or yeah,
First
indigenous.
Nations people, yeah, indigenous
Yeah,
people. So think
yeah,
about it. They lived in your area where you currently are right now, and they lived there and they were able
yeah.
to adapt to that environment, right? So they
Mhm.
slept at night when it was very cold and there was storms, and it was rainy and it was windy, and they woke up, and even though it was chilly in the morning and they may have leather shoes or barefoot, they were able to walk around, walk through the forest, find food, hunt for food, gather for food, continue to repair their, villages, find fresh water, and also deal with all of the community stuff, find a suitable mate, for the men, compete with other men who are trying to be the alpha male, right? All these things
Yeah,
that we still see in our society today. So they had that element of stress, but they also had all the environmental stressors, which was the
yeah,
cold air, that hot summer, that lack of food because the hunt was not successful. And so now they have to live on berries for the next couple of days before there's another successful hunt. So our
mm,
bodies are designed to adapt to these stressors. They've been conditioned for thousands and thousands of years to adapt to these stressors. And what we've done is we've created this world of comfort. And we
yeah,
thought that by creating all of these elements of comfort in everything that we do, and never, ever, ever wanting to be uncomfortable, we've created all of these mental health issues, control issues, anxiety
yeah,
issues, depression issues, um, all of these issues that really don't exist in indigenous cultures. When they start to
mm,
study the indigenous cultures that are still on the planet and still existing as they have for many years, they just don't have these issues. So we're creating it. And so by teaching people how to get back to our primal strength, our inner fire, we use tools such as heat stress, which would be like a sauna, giving the body stress, which is a type of hormesis, is the kind of scientific term. It's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type of stress. And then
mhm.
cold stress. And so the big exercise, anytime you're giving somebody these stressors by hot and cold therapy, or even the breath work that we teach, some of it is a stressor as well. Like the Wim Hof breathing is considered a stressor. It's really learning the art of letting go. How
Mm.
can you mentally let go, not try to control? So it's a trust exercise. You're learning to trust the person who's coaching you. You're learning how to
Okay.
trust yourself. You're learning how to step into discomfort. And instead of trying to control the scenario and fight the experience, to completely let go and allow your body to do what it already knows how to do, which is adapt to the cold. And our body has all of these mechanisms that have been designed to adapt to the cold. It knows how to heat your body back up through a process called cold thermogenesis. It knows how to circulate blood from the fingers and the toes to the core to keep the vital organs warm. It knows how to turn on brown fat, which
Mhm.
converts visceral fat into heat. It knows how to produce norepinephrine that will shift your focus and your mind immediately. So all of these things are happening on autopilot, and all you really need to do is just get out of the way. And so by teaching people that, it translates into other areas of their life, because now they're realizing, and the feedback that we constantly get is they're just not, they feel more calm and even keeled throughout the day. They're not getting
Mhm.
triggered so often. They're
Mhm.
not having highs and lows. They're not feeling that unsettled, constant anxiety that's like in their belly all the time. They're just feeling more grounded and more secure and more confident, just by practicing simple techniques, hot and cold therapy, breath work, and then obviously that the community aspect that I spoke
Mm.
about earlier as well, being a very
Yeah.
a very, very important part too.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Letting go. I think that that's something that people do tend to struggle with, right? Like where we tend to be so tightly wound up sometimes thinking that we have control over so many things in our lives that coming to a place like Optimyze really allows you to practice the skill and the art of being able to let go. So if someone was to come into your place and they've, fresh off the street, they've never done any of this stuff, um, what would be your recommendation on how they can get started in the sense that, how do you start out? Like, would you go directly into the cold plunge or would you work your way up into that?
Yeah, we work our way up to that. So the first experience is really just getting a tour of the facility, learning about the therapies, taking in all the sensory, like what's going on, the people. And so I think that's important. And then two, we start off with something really relaxing and really allowing the body to just be present and relax. And it's called compression therapy. And so there's these big, like almost boots that you slide onto your leg, and they fill up with air. And what they're doing is they're pumping the lymph system and also circulating blood from your feet into your core. So it's really good for your heart as well. It's good for heart, it's good for lymphatic system, and it's good for circulation. And the lymphatic system is what removes metabolic waste. So it's really important to do that often because it helps to remove that metabolic waste. After that, we have some technologies that they can pair with that system. And so we have a device called the New Calm, which is like a 20-minute power nap we will set people up with because we realize that sleep issues are common in our society today. So we have a remedy for that. And that really helps to relax the mind. It's about taking the brain waves and slowing down the brain waves of the mind. Because if your mind is always busy, right, that's the term that people technically use. What they're really saying scientifically is that their brain waves are in what they call high beta brain waves. And when your brain is in high beta brain waves, you're in a state of stress and you're in a state of fight or flight. And there is no room for like feedback when you're in that state. There is no room for being able to take what somebody else is saying and see their perspective when you're in the high beta brain waves, because that state of the mind is designed for fight or flight. It's designed for reaction. So if you meet somebody in your life that's constantly very impulsive and very reactionary, and they're always doing things very impulsively, there's a good chance that their brain is constantly in this high beta brainwave state. And so it's very impulsive, and you have to make impulsive decisions in life. Like, if you're walking along the trail and you see a rattlesnake, like you need to be impulsive. You need to figure out what you need to do to get away from that scenario very quickly. So this, all these mechanisms, they serve a purpose. But when you're just trying to relax and have a conversation or go about your everyday work activities, it's just not a good place to be impulsive and to be reactionary all the time. So
100%. Yeah. And also when you're in that state, it's hard to get into flow. It's hard to find that creativity, right? That you're trying to find maybe when you're trying to say, build your business or
no
trying
creativity.
to find a solution, and I like that you've connected that to being receptive to other people.
There's no suggestibility. You're not suggestible.
Right.
You're not suggestible. And so that's why when you start to slow down the brain waves of the mind and you start to get into, say, the alpha wave states and theta wave states and what you would call the meditative states, that's when your mind becomes more suggestible. So children are born with very slow brain waves. Our babies, they're pretty much asleep more than they are awake, right? They're basically up for a little bit, kind of wandering around the room, with their eyes, and then they're asleep. So they're actually spending more time in delta waves. Their body's obviously growing. There's a slow process, as it takes a long time for a human baby to grow up, where in the animal kingdom, they just grow up a lot faster. It's more of a survival thing. we nurture obviously babies like for a much longer period of time. And then as kids start to get older, they become very curious, right? Their brain waves are doing more theta waves. So they are very suggestible to information. So almost got to be careful what you tell the kids, or they're going to absorb everything that's happening in the house because their mind is very suggestible, because they're walking around essentially in a low frequency brainwave state. So anything that mom is doing or dad is doing, or how does mom treat dad? How does dad treat mom? You know, what is their perceived, you know, what is their perception at that moment of their life? That's all basically being highly suggested into their nervous system. And essentially what's that is doing is creating their patterns that will play out in their life. And that's why the ages of, say, you know, birth to like 8 years old are so important, because the brainwave states are slower. And then they get into that creative mode as they get a little bit older, and those are more alpha waves, and their imagination is like very bright, and they see things more in pictures and more daydreaming and all those types of activities. And then at a certain stage of life, we just become less suggestible as adults, and we spend more time in our beta wave frequencies, and we're working and using the computer and problem solving and all of these types of things. So I learned a lot by studying brainwaves and by studying Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and also learning how can I have influence on my brainwave states, because I don't want to be impulsive. I don't want to be reactive, but I also don't want to be daydreaming and sleeping, you know, when I need to be productive. So it's like, how can I, you know, how can I have some influence over my state of being by using different techniques? And so some of the techniques that we have, from the breathing exercises and the cold therapy, not only have a physical effect on the body, but they're also having an effect on our brainwave states, and they're shifting our brainwave states either, you know, into more alert modes or into more calm, inner focus, more suggestible states. So for example, cold water therapy, when you first get into freezing cold water, your brain is going to become very aware and alert, and it's going to basically perceive that scenario as stressful. And so your body automatically goes into a fight or flight cycle where it starts to produce adrenaline. You start to change your respiratory rate. You start to breathe kind of heavy. You start to tense up. You start to basically have like a mini panic attack, right? All that's happening. And there's actually a lot of benefit in that short little element of stress, believe it or not, because your body's producing endorphins and chemicals that not only help shift your mood, but they also help to fight inflammation. So your body becomes this pharmacy of different cocktails of different molecules. And then what happens is, what we teach them is how to let go. So we teach them a practice, well, how to close your eyes, to slow down the brain waves, how to slow your breathing, which then slows your heart rate down, and how to basically go into a deep, deep, deep meditation. And when you're in that deep, deep, deep meditation, while you're sitting in that freezing cold water, your brain waves are also shifting and they're slowing down. And as you're slowing your brain waves down, you're getting to be more suggestible. So you're more open to information. So what a perfect opportunity to say a prayer, to say a mantra, to say an I am statement, and repeat those words for that 2, 3, 4 minutes, however long you're going to stay in there, because you have this window of suggestibility, which is essentially what hypnosis is working with. You know, when they work with people one-on-one, and they're getting their minds to slow down, get into these suggestible states, and then help them to change their behaviors and patterns. So that's a technique that I teach all of the people that I work with.
Wow. Yeah, you've got me curious about wanting to come. That's amazing. That's amazing. I definitely didn't know that those are the stages and how we can leverage our brain waves in terms of the activities that we're doing and aligning the right brain waves to the right activities. So So how does it work? Is it like it starts at beta, then it goes to alpha?
High
What?
beta, mid
High
beta,
beta.
low beta. Then
Okay.
after beta it goes into alpha. Alpha is when we start to see things more in like imagination, pictures and shapes. Then after alpha, it goes into theta. Theta is when you're more asleep than you are awake, but you're very conscious of what's going on in the room. The best way I could describe theta is if you're watching TV at night, you're falling
Yeah.
asleep as you're watching the television. You know what's going on in the room. You can hear the television. You can almost follow the show. But in the meantime, you're like dreaming and you're off in like la la land, and then you're back to the room, and then you're off in la la land, and then you're back to the room. That is basically like that drunken state.
Yeah.
That's the theta state. And then, of course, as you fall asleep, that's the delta wave sleep. That's the
Okay.
lowest frequency of the brain. And then they have something that's even higher than beta brain waves. It's called the gamma wave frequencies. And
Mm.
so Joe Dispenza describes this as a very high frequency of the brain. It's like 30 hertz to 100 hertz. And what
Okay.
happens is when you're having, I would say like an epiphany of some kind, but that epiphany or that transcendental kind of moment is happening from inside of you, not from outside of you. So it's not like if you're at a concert and you're like super stimulated by, say, the music and the lights and the people, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like having that sort of high, but you're having a high from inside, from like some sort of imagery or inner journey that is vibrating the brain in very, very, very high frequency. And so that very high frequency is apparently very beneficial for humans. It's just, you have to like adopt a practice on how to get into those states. Monks and different yogis like have mastered that. So,
Mm.
and I think my personal opinion is that when you drink plant medicine, like people who are doing these different types of medicines like ayahuasca or mushrooms, I think they're having moments of like gamma
Mm.
brainwave frequencies because they're having
Yeah.
these inner epiphanies and journeys and this knowing that's like deep within themselves. So yeah, brainwave states are really, really interesting, and I'm still learning. I know the basics, and I'm still exploring them. And I've gotten some testing done on my own brainwave states. And so then when you learn the connection between your brainwaves and your nervous system and the electrical part of the human body, you realize that that's essentially the driving force to everything. Everything is energy, everything is electrical, everything is molecules, atoms, and everything is vibrating and moving. And then you get into the hard stuff like the tissues and the cells and the physical stuff that we see, basically the meat suit that you're wearing and the meat suit
Yeah.
that I'm wearing. But
Yeah.
at the core of this meat suit, everything is vibrating and everything is frequency and everything is moving. And that's hard to fathom, but
It is. Yeah.
we understand that it's true through
Yeah.
our understanding of physics and science, but it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to see physical things as always moving, but they are always moving.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. And I keep thinking about the brainwaves and how, like, how can we use the technology that you have in your center to leverage and help people with their mindsets, like help them understand their mindsets, their limiting beliefs, what's holding them back, but also help them put in place the things that they need to do to start making changes that are going to be sustainable. Like, I'm really just brainstorming out loud here of like, how can we use that technology to help people get a hold of being able to manage their mind more effectively, to be able to live and lead healthier lives where there is more calm, there is more peace, there is more of the letting go. It's almost
Well,
like a
different
puzzle.
people are
And
dealing with different things, right? So
yeah,
you have groups of people that are overly anxious. So I would say somebody who's overly anxious has has the challenge of they're constantly thinking into the future.
yeah,
So mentally, they're spending a lot of time into the future. They're worrying about things that have not occurred yet. So they're worrying about something that has not happened yet. So essentially they're not present. So they're not present enough. And so their mind is constantly computing what could happen, what might happen, what may happen, what's the possibility, and then trying to figure out, like, you know, how to pivot, what do I do if he says this? What do I do if she says that? Like just creating all of these like potential pathways. So there's a lot of mental energy that you're spending, you know, in the future. And then people who have like low energy, and these are high energy people usually, they're usually kind of intense. They usually like, they can be impulsive. They can get wound up very easy. They don't feel settled in their body. They don't feel grounded. They even sometimes take on a certain body type. And then you have, you know, another group of people, right, that's like low energy and they just can't get moving, you know, and they might be spending way too much time in the past. They're focusing on what happened 20 years ago or yesterday or earlier today, and they just won't let it go. And so they're constantly revisiting these situations and scenarios in their life that's already happened and trying to change the outcome of that in their mind, but they can't change it because it's already happened. And so they have like depression issues, and they have a hard time taking on new tasks or trying something new or changing a ritual or routine or habit because they're just stuck in the past. And I tend to see that with victims, people who have a very strong victim mentality, you know, like the world is happening to me, you know, not for me and at me. So, yeah. So basically it's like important to just gather like where people are, what their challenges are. And then I would say these tools are they're pretty general in the sense that when you go to a therapist, a lot of times you're thinking like, this therapist is going to help me. This therapist is going to say or do something that's going to have this profound impact on me. And then I'm going to change my behavior, change my life, or it's going to change the way I feel every day in my body. I think therapy is good for integration. I think it's like an effective tool to help make sense of maybe what you just went through. But ultimately, I would say the main driver in change for the good is action. And so when you take action, even though you might be scared or anxious or concerned, but you know, you're obviously doing things that are safe, right? Of course. But you take that step into that murky, uncharted water, there's always like some growth or some change that happens. And then you feel different. You feel like, okay, this is the way I felt before I did that. This is the way I felt after I did that. And then that's really good to just create that inner knowing. So you're not just taking advice from other people, right? And then if you continue the practice where you actually create a ritual or routine or a new program where you like commit to that, to the power of commitment, then that's where real change and transformation lives. And that's when you get to create that new you through this new ritual, this new habit, this new routine. And so that's where a lot of people fall off. They go to the weekend seminar, they get excited, they meet people, they have all of these ideas of things that they want to implement. They might try it for a few days or maybe even a week, but they don't follow through and they don't actually commit to it. And so they get right back into their old routine, their old funk, and their old state of being. So learning is a very powerful tool, and I love learning, but we can get stuck in learning. Like I'm part of like a lot of networking groups, and they're like book clubs, you know, where it's like, how many books can I read in 1 year? And it's like, I love to read, but it's also this element of TMI. right?
Yes.
And
Yes,
so if you're not
absolutely.
like driving these points of this book by this mentor that you really believe in, and you're not actually implementing that into your activities,
Hmm.
and you're really just like walking around consuming lots of information that might be interesting to talk about with other people, and you might sound really smart at a barbecue, but you know, I think the action is really where the change is, and that's the part where people are most hesitant. And I
Yeah,
understand, that's the hard part.
I agree. I mean, it's easy to consume information. That's the easy part, right? It's the application, it's the implementation. That's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Like you can read a book, but if you've done that, if it hasn't benefited you or your life in any way, shape, or form, then that's just nice to have information. It's not necessarily going to help you, grow or move forward in your life. And I think that, like, you're right. That is where people fall off. But I think when what you mentioned earlier, which is like creating that community, that sense of community and connection where you can actually be yourself and you're supported, with the right people, with the right coaches that can help you through your journey of growth and, navigate those murky waters. I think that that's where the benefit is it's being able to thrive and learn, in a community of people that are going to support you along your journey.
Right.
And
And
maybe,
another hard thing to do,
Mhm.
which I'm learning that is like lost in society today, or less in society today, is
Mhm.
how does your mind, how does your heart lead the direction of your mind? So in like, you know what I mean? So you're making
Yeah.
decisions from your heart, which is feeding the mind into the decision. But at the core, the energy is coming from the heart, which is like you're doing everything with good intention,
Yes.
you know?
I
And
love
so,
that.
that's like, I would say, probably if we got the entire globe to start making decisions from their heart
Yeah.
versus their minds, and their minds directing their heart, where the heart starts to direct the mind, we
Mhm.
would probably see like a whole new world. But they always say, don't try to change the world, just work on changing yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. Wow, Michael, thank you. It has been quite the conversation. So much. You have a wealth of information that you've shared. It's funny because, as they say, our purpose tends to be born from our pain, the things that we've struggled with in our life, and we've found answers to. We look to help others, find those answers quicker, easier, faster. We sort of start to make it our life's mission to to ease the suffering that we've experienced in our own lives. So, Michael, if people want to be able to follow you, follow your work, come to your centers, what is the best way that people can know more about you and get a hold of you?
Thank you. Yeah, the easiest way to find me is on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. You can find me at my name, Michael, Michael _ Roviello, Roviello. So that's the best way to find me. Our website is Optimyze, OPTIMYZE.me. And so that's our center. We have 2 locations. We're building our 3rd here in Arizona.
Wow.
I teach workshops. I do retreats. I travel. I do experiences. So for people who want to work with me individually and go through, experiences of transformation, I have workshops pretty much every quarter that you can participate in. And yeah, that's about it.
Amazing. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on today. I hope we can keep in touch and looking forward to seeing those centers come up one by one. Looking forward to what you guys get up to. Thank you for coming today.
Awesome. Thank
Take
you,
care.
Mary. Appreciate it.